Welcome to part 4 of the YouTube series for Infor CRM mobile development. In part 3, we covered the application lifecycle and customization API. Today, we're going to go over some tips and tricks for debugging in development and production. So let's get started. One of the first things I do when I set up a JavaScript project is install ES Lint. It's one of the most important tools in our arsenal. This can fix a lot of issues in your code before you even deploy or have to debug at all. So I really encourage you to go to eslint.org, check out the documentation, and get started in your project with it. Before we talk about some mobile-specific debugging techniques, I just wanted to point out the documentation for the Chrome developer tools. If you look at this X where the close is, there's an ellipsis here. You can click that, go to Help, Documentation. You can view all the keybinds and specific documentation for each one of these tabs in the Chrome developer tools. In previous videos, we mentioned the global app object. We're going to go ahead and inspect some stuff on that today that will assist you with debugging. We're at the login screen. I'm going to type in app.context. You notice there's only two things in here right now. There's localization information and some history information. And we're going to go ahead and log in. And we're going to go, I hit the up arrow in Chrome Dev Console, it repeats the last command. So it's going to go app.context, we're going to hit enter, expand that again, and you're going to see all this contextual information is now there based on the current user. So I'm logged in as Lee. So here's some of that user information. And we also have some information on what integrations are enabled. And if you look in your application module, we have an init dynamic function, and you can use this after you've logged in to inspect that app context to determine whether to load your extension or not. So this is our back office extension integration, our application module. We have init dynamic, and we have a check here if the integration is enabled. And what that's doing is it's checking that app context and then the integrations array and seeing if the back office extension integration is enabled on the server. So you can turn off your application module by looking at that app context if you want. So one of the things you're going to want to do while you're debugging is maybe some of the data doesn't look right, maybe the markup's not generated correctly, and you want to inspect that. There's a couple ways of getting a view instance. So the first, which isn't very useful in most cases, is app.getView, and then it'll take in an ID. And if you see here, this is the view ID, so we could say contact list, and it would return the view. But we do have a shortcut, so I'm going to assign this to a variable called view. We could say app.getPrimaryActiveView, and that's going to return this view that's currently being shown. You can see view.id is contact list, so that's correct. One of the helpful properties that you're probably going to want to use often is view.domNode. And this will actually allow you to inspect the DOM that was generated by this view. And Chrome even uses the element inspector, so when you're mousing over the elements in the console, it's highlighting the actual elements over here on the left. And since this is a list view, we also have access to all the underlying data that this is bound to, so we could say view.entries. So if you look at the network tab, this data was requested from SData, and now we can go ahead and just look at the underlying raw data right here under view.entries. So now let's go ahead and jump to the detail, and we're going to say var detail equals app.getPrimaryActiveView. And details use, instead of entries, which is plural, it's going to be entry. So this is the underlying sData entry that this detail view is bound to. And then if we go ahead and click edit, clear the console here, we're going to say var edit equals app.getPrimaryActiveView. And edit also has access to an entry that's being edited. But there's other useful things that we can do on the edit. We could say edit.fields, which is going to be all the form fields that this current edit view has. So we can get the value of particular fields within the form itself. Edit.fields. I'll just inspect the whole fields object. You can see all the different form fields. So here's work phone. It should have a DOM node as well. So if we mouse over that, you can see it's being highlighted there. And we should be able to get the value of it as well. There's also a set value. So that can clear it. So let's go ahead and just punch in a random phone number here. An edit view also has a get values that it uses, and it will aggregate all the dirty fields that it will post to sData or put, depending on whether it's an insert or an update. So get values. You can see this is the only field we changed, and you can see the new value. So when you go ahead and click save, edit.getValues is going to get called, and this is only going to be the payload that's sent to sData. So we don't have to send all the fields every request. So we are running the development server. So if we want to set a breakpoint, we can go to sources, go to expand source out. I'm under contact, so we're going to go to source out, views, contact. This is the detail, so I'll open that. And let's say we want to set a breakpoint on this call work action. So we can see there's a call work phone, so we'll set a breakpoint there. And we will click it. You can see the breakpoint hit in Chrome. So there's now a watch tab or section here. So you can also add that global app variable here if you want. So you can inspect, the app context or whatever you want. Maybe you want to inspect this view instance here as well. So you could add those to the watch as you're stepping through the code to see how the state changes. So we'll go ahead and step into this. And just like Visual Studio or other editors, you can see we can mouse over variables as we're stepping through the code and see what the values are and see what's getting called. So if you're not in a development environment and you still need to debug once it's deployed, there are some options there as well. You're not going to have access to each individual source file like you would in development, but there are some things you can do to enable a kind of an unminified file that's easier to debug. So let's go ahead. I've deployed out the mobile portal here in Application Architect. I'm going to go to where I deployed it under inetpub www slx mobile. And we should have we have an index.aspx, which is the default document. We also have an index no cache aspx, which does not use the application cache manifest. So you're going to want to use that, but let's go ahead and edit one of these index files and change the source of the JavaScript. So if we look under content JavaScript, we can see these -debug files get generated. So we're going to go ahead and edit the head file here to use those. So we have Argos SDK and Argos Sales Logic. So we're going to add the -debug to them and save it. We're no longer on the development site, so we're going to go ahead. We're going to go to localhost, SLX mobile, and we're going to go to index nocache.aspx. We're going to hit F12 to open the Chrome Dev Console. And I want to expand content JavaScript, and I want to make sure those debug files got loaded, and they did. And why do we want to load these debug files? So if we go, and let's just look at them in a text editor real quick here. So if you look at Argos SDK, you can see it's one line, all compressed. It's not going to be very easy to read. However, if we look at the debug version, you can see none of the white space has been stripped out of this file, so we're going to be able to set breakpoints much easier. So we're going to go ahead and open Argos Sales Logic's debug. And we're going to want to find, I did a Control F, CRM, views, contact, detail. So here's where the detail view is defined, and we can go back to that call work function we were debugging earlier. So there's where we'd want to set our breakpoint this time. Now if for some reason you can't edit the index head and change these source files, Chrome does have another way to format the file. So let's go back, and we're going to undo this change here. So now we're no longer using the debug files. I'm going to hit refresh in Chrome here. And let's go expand content, JavaScript. You can see the debug files are no longer used. And if we click it, you can see it's just one line. But Chrome's going to ask us if we want to pretty print this minified file. And if this dialog doesn't show up for some reason, you can also go down here on the bottom left. There's actually a pretty print button right here. And if you click that, Chrome's going to go ahead and expand it out just kind of like our debug file was. Now this will get a little bit slow depending on the speed of your computer. That's why I recommend, if you can, switch to the debug files, but if you have to fall back to this, this is an option as well. So we can go ahead and hit Control F, and we can go ahead and search for that CRM views contact. We have our call work function here, so you could set the breakpoint that way as well. This also applies to cascading style sheets as well. So if you go under the CSS folder, you notice there's a debug file that gets generated there. So you would be able to go and find the CSS file here and put in the debug file, and you'd be able to debug that a little easier as well. So that way when you're looking at styles in the elements tab, everything's not going to just show up on line 1. And that's going to be it for part 4. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.